CERA is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. It's intended and was funded by the Treasury Department of the federal government. It has been allocated $25 billion dollars to assist households that are unable to pay rent due to COVID-19 pandemic. There were different ways in which funds came from the Treasury Department to communities. The funds that we are allocating came directly from the Michigan Supportive Housing, no, MISHDA, Michigan. What does S stand for? State Housing Development Authority. And so they're the state housing authority that many of our programs run through. And so again, you'll hear us referring to MISHDA and what MISHDA would like for us to do. Sometimes we'll be referring to what MISHDA is not doing well. Just be patient with us as we work through that frustration. But this program is going to be really complicated and it's changing daily. This is a lot of funds that are running through community. And a lot of communities are kind of working with this big pot of funds for the first time. So locally in Washtenaw County, we were allocated $21 million to get out to community by December of 2021, with the opportunity to extend that. MISHDA did set some deadlines for communities. We're hoping to be able to spend at least 75% of the $21 million allocation by September, ideally. And if we do that as a state, then there's opportunity for this program to be extended and opportunity to serve more folks. So there is a lot of funding coming in down to this, funneled through this program to go out to community. And it's a really great opportunity for folks to maintain their stable house or maintain and create stability for housing. So CERA, who is eligible for CERA? So anyone that is 80% or less of area median income, and we will also send out information describing what area median income means and what how much that means. So don't feel like you should know that now. But individuals in households that have qualified also for unemployment benefits would be applicable for these funds, and individuals that cannot demonstrate that they're at a risk of homelessness due and or have had a change in income due to the pandemic. Who is not eligible? So households that have incomes above 80% of the area median income, households that cannot show a COVID-19 hardship, and I'll show you what, I'll provide you documentation or show you what you could use in order, or what you're looking for to show proof of hardship. Households that are homeowners. So there are other programs that are out there in order to assist folks that own their home and have mortgages or are in land contracts. CERA cannot support those individuals. And then renter households that are not behind on either their rent or utility bills. So I think that's really important. That doesn't mean that they won't ever be able to be provided resources through CERA. It just means if they're not at least 1 month behind, we can't process their application and they wouldn't be applicable. So how much rental assistance can someone receive? Again, it depends on their income, but someone 50% ANI and up could receive 12 months of rental insurance assistance, plus an additional 3 months should the need still be there. Someone who's 80% or 50 to 80% AMI and up would, 50% and lower would receive 12 months. 50 to 80% would receive 10 months with the option of 3 months of additional assistance. Is there any limitations? Yes. So folks can only receive assistance up to 150% of the HUD fair market rent. And so again, we will tell you and help you to understand what that means. But basically there's a cap for how much assistance we can be able to provide someone. And that depends on how much they're paying in rent. Now, if someone is still, say for instance, they're in a housing unit that's above that 150%, and they can prove that they still can afford whatever their tenant portion is outside of what CERA can provide, there are other additional funds in community to support those folks. So again, there's a lot of resources that we have out here to make sure that people can stay stably housed. There's also a really unique opportunity with these funds that we can provide an internet stipend to folks who are also behind on that bill and need that in order to continue with their education or employment, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll talk a little bit about that later too. I've already said a lot. Are there any questions so far? CERA team, am I missing anything so far about what I've already explained?
Morgan, there's a question.
Hi, Morgan.
Oh, yeah.
This is Sade. Hi, I do have a quick question. Just say, for instance, if we do come across someone that does not meet the requirements, if they are above income or if they are homeowners, where do we direct them for those additional funds? Because we, doing intake, we come across all different types of situations. So I just want to know, like, where do I direct those individuals?
Very good question. So I can speak to the above the 80, and then Teresa, you might know a little bit more about the homeowner programs. But the above 80, that would be a barrier buster request. Though above, yeah, that would be a barrier busters request. Let's just put it there. We also have additional funds in, no, they might not serve above 80. So barrier busters, and we can give you information on how to put in and access barrier busters. We'll do a training later on down the line with the barrier buster staff. So barrier busters is a program that's out of the Office of Community and Economic Development as well. And it has funds that can be able to assist community members that are in emergency and have a crisis need. And so it's very flexible funds. It can serve whomever fits the criteria. There is no income criteria for barrier busters, acknowledging that the majority of community are living paycheck to paycheck, especially in Washtenaw County, where affordable housing is not plentiful and available. So there is a pot of funds that can assist some folks, though it would be dependent on whatever their crisis is and the reason why they're in crisis. So it's not as straightforward as CERA would be, but that would be an opportunity and an option. And then Teresa, for the mortgage holders, where are those resources?
That's a great question. Overall, I just thank you for asking it. So one of the things is we did have some CARES funds. That was one of the first federal dollars that came down for COVID response. We've set aside some for mortgage support and services. We haven't put our RFP out. We will be soon, and we expect those services to start in the summer. So in the meantime, I think I would still, well, there's a couple things that exist. If someone is over 55, Housing Bureau for Seniors can take referrals related to mortgage support. Green Path is another service provider that's in the community, and we can maybe create a list of that. But eventually we're hoping to contract with a few folks to expand their amount of services. And once we have that, we'll share that with you on the homeowner side. If there is someone who specifically is low income, and well, you don't have to clarify that, but if somebody needs help with a mortgage payment, we did say that that could potentially be covered with barrier busters. So you also can connect there too until we get the new program set up. So more coming on that, but if they are over 55, we have someone immediately you can send them to. We'll get you some more information.
Are there any other questions? And I'm sorry, I can't see everyone's screen, so feel free to just jump in and ask a question if you have one. Okay. So how would someone prove their hardship? And so I want to make this point really, really clear. We want to This is not a program in which we're trying to funnel people out of. This is a program where we're trying to do everything possible in order to make sure that they are eligible for. So if there's a question, if someone pops up as you're working with them, and it's hard for you to figure out their hardship, or it's not very clear, please, please, please reach out to anyone at any of the organizations that you'll be housed at, so that we can really figure out how to get support to this client. But there are some ways that Mishta has told us that we can prove hardship. A lot of it is self-validating. So you can write a letter. The client would write a letter explaining what their hardship was, and any type of documentation they can provide to support that. So, for instance, if their hours have decreased at their employment, then they can just submit a pay stub or a timesheet that shows the hours in 1 week or 1 month versus the hours in another. They can provide their unemployment letter that they've received. There's multiple different ways that folks can be able to prove their hardships. And so here is some things, again, that Mishta has said that we could use. And again, this is another area where we really, really want to figure out ways to get people support. So if you have questions about it as you're approving or in the application review process, please, please, please reach out and ask. And then lastly, the landlord portion of this. What do landlords need in order on their side of this program in order for these applications to be processed and to go through? And landlords would need to create their own application. Landlords would need to have a copy of the lease. Landlords would need to be able to provide a ledger of payment history for 2020 and 2021. We'll need a W-9 from landlords, so that it's very clear that we can pay them and that they are a business that can receive money. And then we also need verification of core costs if it's applicable. Another really important point I want to note, folks do not need to be in eviction in order to receive these funds. Again, this is really, really flexible funds that can get people stably housed upstream further than what we've ever been able to do. They just need to be 1 month behind in their rent in order to qualify. So I'm going to hand it over to the next presenter, but I want to make sure I get any questions, again, high level questions on the program, who we can provide resources to, and any other questions. Okay. Support. Is it Anna, or Anna, are you next after me?
I am next, yes. Okay, thanks, Morgan. So some of this information is probably going to be repetitive for people who've already been working on the program, existing SOS and Hawk staff, but did want to just provide a little bit of information about the CERA portal and the online application. And in a minute, we'll watch just one video. There's a ton of videos to watch, but we're just going to spotlight one of them. So Mishta has partnered with an organization called Kinetic to create an online application process for applying to CERA, just knowing the mass amount of people that are going to apply for the program and the difficulties in processing, paper applications as we would have if we didn't have the portal. They worked with Kinetic to be able to develop that, and it's available both just through accessing on a laptop and also on a smartphone. I've put the link to the application itself right there as well for easy access for you all, and we'll share the slides after this as well. And that portal launched last week for tenants to be able to submit applications. And then this week, staff at various agencies, including Hawk and SOS and OCED, were granted access to the portal to begin processing applications. And in the portal, each staff person will have a particular role. There's 3 key roles that staff might have. One would be an assigner. So that person will receive applications. They'll sort of be the first person to take a look at an application that comes through the portal once it's complete. So they'll receive them and then assign them to a reviewer. A reviewer will then review the applications for completeness and eligibility, and then sign and send to processing. And then the processor would be the one who finishes the review of the case and approves or rejects, and then it moves sort of into the fiscal process. One important thing to note is that staff roles might evolve throughout the next few weeks as we continue to fine tune our workflow and make sure that the process that we have set up is meeting community demand and need. So you might have a role right now that could evolve over the next couple of weeks. Okay, next slide. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, thank you. So Mishta had conducted a pretty long training. I think it was like an hour and a half, and it went over all of the different steps in the CERA process. And then they broke them all down into these little snippet videos, which are super helpful. And we'll go over basically most of the information that you need to know right off the bat. It'll take some time, I think, to get accustomed to the portal and all of the processes, but the videos will definitely help. We'll share the slides, like I said, after this training, but all of the videos are embedded in here. And so these right here are going to cover sort of the more general CERA and portal information. And we'll actually be looking at the applying and intake one in a minute. But those are all right here, the general ones. You can go to the next slide, Morgan. And then these are specific to the assigner role as well. There's just a few of them here, and they're all embedded as well. You can go to the next slide. And the reviewer videos as well, a few more for this one, but you can see they're relatively short. And like I had mentioned, I think you can watch the videos, but really you're going to learn by doing. So it'll probably take a little more than just viewing the videos to get accustomed to your role. And then processor is just a few more as well. Okay, so really the next steps for the portal training and getting access to the portal. So of course, first and foremost, getting access to the portal. And so we had shared some information about the staff that were joining the teams and shared that with Mishta, and they had sent out some account credentials to some staff. And so once you have access to your work email, if you don't already, I would check in there in your inbox to see if you got the email to get access to the portal, check your spam folder to see if it's there. And if you don't see it anywhere, definitely notify your supervisor and they can let us know so that we can contact Mishta and make sure that you get that email with the link to set up your account. Once you do get that email, you'll want to set up your password, and then they have a multi-factor authentication process. It's pretty easy to complete. They just basically send you, once you try to log in, they'll send you a follow-up email with a code, and then you input the code into the portal and then you're good to go. So again, if you don't have that email, please notify your supervisor. And then also review the training videos that are all covered in those preceding slides. And then the next important step is to practice submitting an application on the CERA test site. So important to note that this is a different site than the actual application portal. And so the link to that one specifically is right here. And basically what that's going to do is walk you through the process that an applicant would complete in order to submit an application through the portal. And that'll just help you understand sort of what's required and any of the questions that might come up from an applicant if they end up reaching out or need more information about their application. So that is the one video that we wanted to cover today. Rather than me doing a demo, we'll just show the video that's already been recorded on this. And it was offered by Kinetic as part of that larger training. Morgan, can you click that?
So I'm in the acceptance environment, the link that we mentioned, the mi.govtech.kinetic cloud. And the whole purpose of why we're doing this process is to really streamline this for the entire state and to make it as easy and accessible for the people who need it the most. So the application is configured specifically to render on mobile devices on the intake side, but it will work across desktops. Obviously, I'll be giving the demo today. If you come to the URL and you notice this little box over here, then you will know you are in the acceptance environment, and you should redirect to the actual production one if you're trying to submit an application to receive funding. This is strictly for test. There's a little bit of information about the program, and then there are a few different things I can do. I can view required documents. which will give me a quick high-level overview about the type of documents that are going to be expected throughout the application, both for the tenant and for the landlord. And then there's some the general eligibility requirements directly from the CERA website. Additionally, I can click a PDF to find my local contact numbers for all of your organizations, or if I'm on my mobile device, I can click here and I will get a clickable list of all the different agencies that I will be able to contact for support. Again, a key piece of this is to facilitate the communication and provide a little bit of self-service to all of our applicants. So the first thing I'm going to do before I apply for a new application is just check a past app status. So if you're getting a lot of calls with people trying to get clarity on where they stand, you can direct them to this page where they simply enter their birth date, their last name, and their CERA number. And they'll be given a status update of where they are when the application was submitted and what that status means, such as that for seeking more info and that the caseworkers determine more information is needed before a decision can be made. So now, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and apply and start a new application. So I will put in my first name, my last name, my email address, and I'm going to use the same email address for both my tenant email and my landlord email so that you can see the entire process. Next, I'm going to be asked to provide an address that can be verified against the Michigan IT address service. And a positive result will move me through where now it says you need to authenticate your email to move to the next step. So I'll go ahead and click authenticate. And it tells me both the landlord and I have been contacted. Close this page. And here's my email. And now I can see I've received my application. I get a nice notification that tells me I need to verify my email using the link below. Continue. So I will remember my CERA number is 100235. I will select the link 100235. I'll type in my 6-digit code and I'm off and running. If you have the link and your code is expired, then you can always request a new link, a new code via email from that page once you use the URL. So it'll pre-populate with the name you've entered already. You can change it if you want, and then you're taken to a basic info tab where you will need to get a green check mark by each section to complete the entire application. So I'll start out with my contact info and ID. I'll enter my phone number so that my caseworker can get in touch with me, my cell phone, and I'll upload a photo ID. If I were on my smartphone, this is one of the reasons why we encourage you to do a test application. It should access the camera on your device and allow you to submit a picture. So I'll go ahead and complete that section. And now move to my address info. If I needed to add a unit number, I can. And then I'm going to be asked a question, has my landlord filed for eviction? I'm going to say yes for this demo so that you can see a flag on the back end of what it looks like for the applicants. During the training session earlier this morning, someone asked if we could add a similar flag for if your utilities have been cut off, and we will have that implemented by tomorrow's training. So then I complete my address info, I'll complete my lease agreement, so I can upload a photo of my signature page. If I need to add additional pages, I can click it here, and I can easily delete documents as well if I need to. Additionally, if there is no written lease agreement, if it's just a verbal commitment, we have a way to bypass it where you can say that no lease was completed and move on to the next step. We also have space for your utility document, so they can upload who their power company is, what their account number is, and what the amount is, and then they can upload their bill. Here's the additional field we talked about that was added from just this morning's meeting was, is your utility shut off? You can say yes. You can complete the section. Additionally, if they have internet or other items they want billed for, they could upload those documents here by clicking the plus sign. I'll go to my household members, and I'm just going to complete my date of birth, my social. If I don't have a social, and this is per each family member, you can opt out of it and you will not be required to submit it to be able to continue. We do want to capture it if possible though, and all that data will be encrypted. So I could add a household member if I wanted for the sake of the demo. I'll continue some of that complete section. I'll now go to my employment info, complete my section, and as you can see, you can go and add additional income, or you can complete the different sections based on the selection that the applicant makes. Kelly, do you want me to jump into any of these or in particular, or you want me to move through so we can get on to the processing?
If you can go back just one to show in the proof of income, I guess if you can change the election to say, yeah, here we go. So it does allow you to say you can't provide proof of income. So it'll go down to no, and then there'll be a text box that pops up for people to be able to explain why they can't upload the income documents. So if they're self-employed and say they cut hair just at their house and it's all cash-based, they could explain that as to why they don't have visa or other sorts of information they can put in here. But we did put a note that not uploading income documents will cause delays, because it will require a little bit of extra review to make sure, is this a valid reason why they're not uploading income documents. So it might be something that could slow you down in the processing phase. But we really want to encourage people to upload their income documents. And also just in a little bit jump ahead with your reviewer and you're looking at this, they don't upload income documents, but they're working for a place that typically you would think would provide pay stubs. You can prompt them to upload additional documents.
Yep, yeah, thanks. It's great context. So I'll finish out my demographic data really quickly. If I have any other assistance, I could listen here. I'm just going to say no for FEMA, no for tenant-based rental assistance, no for any other programs, and no for eviction diversion program. Now, I think EDP, for all of these questions that are asked as a reviewer, I think EDP is probably the most important. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Kelly.
Sure. Yeah. So definitely for people who are checking yes on EDP, you're going to need to take an extra review to double check what kind of assistance did they receive last year in EDP, which months did it cover, to make sure that when you're reviewing the ledger from the landlord that everything is tying out and that we're not potentially providing duplicate assistance. So really with all of these, you're going to need to take a little bit of an extra look. But EDP is the only one that we really have access to in terms of another system to validate. So the other things are really just self-declaration that they haven't received these funding sources. But with housing choice vouchers or Section 8, you should see that on the lease and in the ledger evidence of subsidy payments being made, just so you can track to make sure we're only assisting for tenant portions.
Yep, thanks. So I'll go ahead and save this section. And now that I've completed all of my check marks, my release and signatures is now available. So I can click on this and I can basically answer my questions. Number 9, has a member of the household qualified for unemployment? Yes or no? Has loss of income? How's it, due to closures? Yes. They can explain some text. Additional healthcare costs. They can upload any additional documents they need. Some of the tax return or something. And then they're taken to their release and signatures, which gives them the standard terms and conditions of the program. And then they're able to sign. That was the signature piece. So I apologize if I created some confusion around physically signed. That's what I meant. So then I complete my signature, and now I'm ready to complete my section and submit my application. Now, I get a notification that my application's been received as an applicant. I also get an email that my application was received, and kind of some standard text about the program, both in English and Spanish.
Okay, I think that's it, Morgan. Thanks. Okay, so again, we just wanted to show that video since it's going to be one of the first next steps that you all will complete in this process as you start working with the portal a little bit more.
Acceptance environment. So
I thought I stopped it. Sorry.
It's okay. I think it's on a loop, it'll just keep going.
I'll exit out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that basically just walks you through the same process that a tenant is going to complete in order to apply for the program. I provide just a little bit more information. I know people who have been working at Hawk and potentially SOS for some time know what EDP is, but EDP and Kelly Rose, the director of MISTA, and then the guy from Kinetic, we're talking about the housing assistance on the unit that might already exist. And one of those options was EDP. EDP is the eviction diversion program that we ran locally through the summer of 2020 through to just early of 2021. And it provided similar kinds of assistance, but it required that somebody be at least somewhere in the eviction process. And so we assisted, I think, Marla and Gina, upwards of 500 households with that program. And the reason that those questions are asked is because we can't provide assistance under CERA to households who have been assisted for the same costs in the same months as another program has provided. So that's going to be something that will have to be double checked in our database, but that's one question that's going to be asked and is super important. So just a little bit more information about that. So I'm sure it was confusing if you didn't know what EDP was. But yeah, so again, just want to reiterate the next steps are to try to get access to the portal, check your email to see if you've gotten that link to be able to log in. If you haven't, notify your supervisor so they can let us know, and then watch the training videos and submit that those couple of practice applications like we just had watched the video covering. That's it for me, Morgan.
Thanks, Anna. So I want to open up before we toss it over to Hawk. One, I want to give us a 5-minute break so we can do bathroom things and all that nitty gritty. But before we do that and transition over to documentation and how to look for those, does anyone have any questions so far? Okay.
I just wanted to clarify, just asking. So I seen there's an application part for the landlords. Would those landlords be applying to be a part of the CERA program, or will we be reaching out to landlords to see if they'll be willing to apply to the program?
Really great question. So the application asks that tenants, when they apply, they provide their landlord's email address. And when landlords apply, they provide their tenant's email address. So when whoever applies first, the other is pinged to start their portion. So they're connected, and it's so that the landlords can be able to provide their documentation to the specific tenant's application.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's another one, Morgan.
Hi, sorry. Before we go, I have another question. Intake, we are getting a bunch of calls with people that are having troubles when they try to apply on the portal with trying to enter information or whatever they run into. Is there some type of troubleshoot questionnaire or phone number that they can call that we aren't able to answer? Because
Nope.
people are, no, all right.
But I do There is what we keep seeing, keep getting reports of is this the county when the people are trying to put in the county in which they live, it's grayed out, but it won't let them submit. We do know that that's one issue that keeps coming up for folks. We've also heard from landlords that they've tried to submit the application and for whatever reason it says it's denied, and then they do it multiple times and for whatever reason it's accepted eventually. So we do not have access to the back end of the portal to troubleshoot in helpful ways to figure out what's happening. But what we have been doing is collecting when these different issues are happening with the application to figure out what people have done in order to solve those issues. Also, Andrew, who's here, he's going to be very helpful as like we do this process. He's going to get into the nitty gritty of it, well, as best as he can, to be able to understand and troubleshoot where there are issues. And we also had an intern internal to OCD do an application and figure out some troubleshooting and ways in which we can figure out how to fix those issues locally. So this is going to be an ongoing process. I think the best thing we can do is ask folks to just keep trying, and then send either Anna, I, or Andrew a message letting us know what you're coming up against so that we can, one, double check with the other complaints that we're getting to see if there was a fix along the way, or two, pass it up to Mishta. But Mishta did ask that we figure it out locally first before we ask them for help. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby again. So basically, I'm just going to go over the documents that are going to be looked for in both the reviewer and the processing application, just so it's easier to see what it's going to look like per document so applications can move faster when you are reviewing them, as well as the different calculations, ledgers, leases. Basically, you're going to see what it's like to be an HRS for the day and go through the full process of what it's like to process these applications. So I am going to start screen sharing. Oh, I have a lot of files open. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to be going over the required documents first. This will let me go. Okay, so when we're looking for like notices of past due rent that are required, there's a couple of different ones we can look for. CERA is a bit different than some of our other funding programs, so it doesn't have to be an official notice received for this one in particular. It could just be an official letter signed by the landlord saying you are behind on your rent, and we can have the ledger corroborate that fact. But the most common things in terms of documentation that we're going to be seeing is you're going to see like notices to quit, demand for possession, court summons, judgments or complaints, or they can have the letter just stating that they're behind. And then the ledger, as long as it does show that there's past due rent amount, that can suffice. When getting in documents for IDs for anybody that's in the household, you're going to only need the IDs for the head of household. It can be official state IDs, passports, things like that. We do also have the option to take HMIS IDs as long as there is the photo in the corner that is produced. The thing is, you're going to need to look at the residency that's located on the IDs, and if the residency does not match the current unit that the tenant is applying for, they're going to need to have a proof of residency as well. In this case, we're going to have most utility bills on file, so one of those can suffice as a proof of residency, but it can also be any official document showing their name as well as their residency on it, like a medical bill or anything like that, and renter's insurance policy. If the court summons was actually serviced to the tenant and hand delivered, that can also suffice as a proof of residency in some cases. In this instance, though, since we are proving that the tenant lives at that unit, a lease would not suffice as a proof of residency typically. Other documents that are going to be needed is also income. So it can be any form of earned or unearned income for members of the household over the age of 18. If somebody is receiving like SSDI or SSI for a child who's under the age of 18, that's not going to count as family income if it's in the child's name. But the most common forms of income we'll receive are like benefit award letters, pay stubs, screenshots from individuals' unemployment records. We'll also get like unemployment letters. And for this one in particular, we can also accept the first 2 pages of the 1040 tax form. When looking at these documents for income that you're receiving, though, there's a couple things that need to be on each one to make sure they're valid, like income documents. So first of all, if they're uploaded, they need to be legible. So if they're too blurry and they can't read, new documents will have to be requested from the tenants themselves. Any income documents do need to have their name on them. So if they're taking a screenshot from their unemployment, usually they will have tenants tell us that they can't take a screenshot that shows both their name and the amount shown. So they'll need to take 2 separate screenshots, one with their name and like case number, and then one with the amounts, because we need to prove that that income actually belongs to that individual. Pay stubs will need to have dates or names as well. And then when it comes to earned income and like pay stubs, you're going to need to make sure the date ranges of the pay periods are on there, since we are calculating based off 30 days of income. So you'll need to check that it equals amount to a full 30 days or at least 4 weeks. Typically, it's looking at whether it's weekly or bi-weekly pay and just knowing the amount of pay stubs that are going to be needed. And then another thing is looking at the pay stubs or any form of income is to ensure that the gross income is what's sent, because sometimes you'll receive documents that only show the net income or what's deposited. But for calculation purposes, we need to go off the gross income before taxes are deducted and things like that. Yeah. One thing about this program is we're also looking at if the family is under 3 people and they have like a food assistance program letter that can be accepted along with proof of income, as long as it is a household under 3 and it can be their case award letter. Most of these things they can get in their My Bridges account by doing screenshots. So if any tenants ask you where they can get it, usually just tell them sign into that. A copy of the lease will be required if there is one available, and a written one. The reason behind this is to make sure that landlords are charging the right rental amount, saying if a month-to-month is going, different things like that. We'll go continue on and look at how to read leases and why this is relevant for doing some of our calculations in a bit. And then so we'll also have tenants that will be uploading different utilities and internet bills. We're going to need to make sure that the name as well as account number is on those bills, so we would have access to check those, as well as the amounts that are owed, to make sure there is a balance that is due on these amounts, or on these bills, sorry. Yes, so it is going to have their names, and I will show in a little bit how to calculate those. And then the other documents we're going to look at is proof of the COVID hardship. So if they are receiving unemployment, just submitting during any time through the March 2020, they can show proof of that unemployment by either uploading their award letter or a screenshot from that, or we'll also see signed COVID hardship letters, which I can show you an example of in a little bit. And the letters don't have to be anything very in detail. It can just say, my utilities rose because we were all being at home for a long time, and sign off on the bottom. They can usually, there was 3 types that were outlined in the policy. So it was if there's financial hardships that were accrued over $500, other expenses over $500, or if their wages were one and they decreased for some reason over that time period since March 2020, and they can provide proof showing that. Those will all be accepted, just a little blurb about what happened and signed off in the bottom in terms of the COVID hardship letters of what we're looking for. So I'm going to get into a little bit of the ledgers and the leases and why it's important to look at these and what we are looking for when we're examining these documents. So I'm going to go and start showing, this is an example of a letter. I did block out the name, but it doesn't have to be anything very in-depth. This client just lost their business because they were no longer able to continue working and seeing clients due to the stay-at-home orders and having people come into their homes. And they would just sign off on the bottom, and that would be an acceptable proof of a COVID hardship when uploading documents. And then I'm going to show some lease examples of what we're looking for. This is a month-to-month lease that we're looking at currently, which so you just want to make sure that it's a current lease date and the amount that's being charged, as well as like the late fees that we're looking at, to make sure that when you're looking at the ledger, there's not any absurd charges that aren't outlined in the lease, or this monthly rental amount says $780 on this particular lease. And at the time, if the tenant is being charged $900, we need to know why, where is this discrepancy coming from? And if there's other charges that were hidden in the lease that unfortunately the CERA program might not be able to assist with, like this particular complex that we're looking at, they charge $780 a month for rent, but we may see their rent is $25 higher, which is their dog or their pet rental fees. And so we would have to take that into account and take that out of the calculations, as we cannot assist with pet fees. Here's another example of a lease we're looking at, just making sure that they are current. This one did expire about 2 months ago, or a month ago, sorry. So that would, if they're still in the unit, put them on to a month-to-month lease, which is why you might see the amount raising or month-to-month charges. So we just want to ensure that the lease matches whatever is going to be on the ledger, and that these tenants are charging the right amount, as well as assisting with the correct amount if they qualify for rent moving forward. This is another example of a lease that has an outline like flat monthly utility bill. And so you can see if their rent on their ledger is showing that they're being charged $739 a month, but we know $39 of that is going into utilities. That would be in a separate portion of our calculation worksheets that I'll show in a little bit, because all of these things are separate and all have to be taken into account on different calculations to help the tenants in the best way. I will show you some ledgers now that show a little bit of how to read and how we have to differentiate these calculations. So this is a first ledger. As we see at the top here, there is our rent charges for $780 matching the lease that was provided. When doing our calculations, we have to look at what each charge is. So we'll see like the late fees, and we know after, I believe it's $400, the late fees have to be removed past that current amount if the landlord is choosing to participate in the CERA program, as well as we'll see electricity and gas lined out. So all of these charges will need to be put into separate calculations. As we can see on the side here, we'll have the rental charges, the rental credits that were paid, giving the total payment amounts, We have court costs that are in a different section, as well as utilities. It was broken up into electric and gas, because they are fitting into the utility portion of the worksheet and not the rental portion. So they do have to remain separate for calculation purposes. Here's another ledger that this one will show just the different late fees that need to be separate. Like this utility bill, for example, will go into the utility portion of the worksheet. The rental amount will stay there. And so you could determine how many months they're behind on rent in doing that. Another thing that was mentioned when looking at the other assistance that they received is the EDP. So let me pull up a ledger that has that. It's this one. So sorry, didn't mean to stop screen sharing. Okay, there we go. Let me find, okay. So when looking at different ledgers, we have to consider the EDP payments as well. So on this one, we can see that there was a check received in October from the Salvation Army in the amount of $3,348. So that was actually an EDP payment that was made on that date. And so it's important to go back. This was one of my clients in particular, so I can pull up his EDP worksheet and look at it and know that the amounts covered, he was 6 months behind on rent when I took on this case in August. So it would have covered from the beginning of March in the pandemic through August. And so there was 2 months of rent, or $1,200 of rent moving forward, which would account for October. So then when you're doing the amount of rental assistance at the bottom and taking the total amount, you want to make sure you're not calculating the months that were included in the rent moving forward or the ones that were covered in this payment and how many months they are behind. But then also another part of EDP that happened is landlords had to waive a certain portion as well as late fees and then any court cost above 150. So we can see these charges here that they had to waive. This client was behind, after separating rent and utilities, was behind $2,220. So 10% that the landlord had to waive was $222, which was waived there. Oh, that's weird. Sorry. Which we can see waived later on in November, as well as the $6 in court fees that had to be waived and the late fees for the 6 months that they were behind, and they waived the late fees. So that's why it's really important to look at these ledgers, because in pulling up our worksheets that we have to fill out for each rental amount, this is just a random client we can fill in. You have to do the bedroom sizes to make sure it compares to like the fair market rate in the county, so we know what to look for. We also have an income worksheet, which I can go over how to fill most of them out in a little bit. So when you're filling this out per your tenant, you're going to put whatever late fees they've had since March, but if they were waived due to the EDP program, you have to do the calculations and take off which ones were waived. If they didn't, you would just put the total late fees that you see based on the ledger. The court cost, most of the court costs ranged between 161 and like 175 to 200. So you would put the court cost for them to be receiving the court costs through the EDP program. There is a additional document that needs to be submitted showing proof of the court cost. We've received documents from attorneys, as in their bills that have showed proof of this. We've also received CODs or judgments that have the court costs written into it, and those can account for official documents. And then in this portion, you're going to put the actual tenant rental amount that was owed. If they are subsidized, they're or on a voucher or anything like that, there is a separate document tab you're going to be using with the tenant portion that should be paid per their subsidy, and then what they are paying. So you're not taking into account for any voucher amounts that are being paid or anything like that. If they're in a subsidized unit, what their subsidy is. And so it can take into account for what should be paid by the voucher versus what should be paid from the tenant. And that can all be put into this main worksheet as well. And then to calculate the number of months they're behind in rental, this will be a bit different when you are calculating rental amounts for folks who received EDP, because they wouldn't be behind months that were paid through the program. But it's going to be taking their rental amount and dividing it by the amount that's owed. So if their rental amount is $1,000 a month and they're behind $6,000, they would be behind 6 months. And so you would fill that in. And as filling this in, the worksheet automatically calculates the amount of rental assistance they would be available to receive. We also have a separate income worksheet, which is where you would fill in the family member's name, the source. So if they received like SSDI, in the amount of $780, they received that monthly. There we go. And it would calculate the total name. Yes. And then it calculates the total. And then say they have a child who's 20 and works, you would usually put the actual name of their job or like where they're receiving this from, and you would get that from the actual pay stubs. And he's just making a flat rate of $500 weekly. And so this will calculate their gross income that can then be imported directly into the document to determine whether they are below 50% or in that 50 to 80% range. And our worksheet itself calculates how much income they are based on their AMI. We also have utility worksheet, which is a little different than what we've seen with EDP, but it also just calculates the different amounts. We'll see 2 different types of electricity bills coming in. Either the tenant, if it's in their name and it's uploaded directly through their bill, we'll see that they'll be to like DTE or any outside provider. When putting that in, you'll just put the provider, past due balance. The calculations for that though, you want to do the past due balance plus the current balance. So it is the total amount owed. And it'll just give you the amounts that they're eligible to receive in future or in utility assistance plus future and total. This does, our utility assistance does have caps that are based on the household size, where our rental assistance doesn't have caps, but it does have like the fair market rent ones. And then, so we'll see either from outside providers like DTE or, oh, there's one other one, but I'm blanking on the name that's very common. And so you can upload the documents through that, or if it's based directly on their ledger and you see that they're charged $49 a month in utility or in electric, we can upload it from that as well. So you can pull from either the utility bills that are owed or their ledger to find out some of the utility amounts. A lot of the ledgers we will see, like trash and sewer, will be on the ledgers themselves. Water bills will come in as separate or can be paid to the utilities. It's just a matter of differentiating where it's going when you are receiving those documents. And then Yeah, so the income can be directly imported into the documents themselves through the separate worksheet as well as the utilities. So that's how we'll find out the overall amount of assistance that they're able to receive. We do have late fees up to $400, eligible court costs up to $150. If the landlords are choosing to participate in the program, then any late fees after $400 they're agreeing to waive by signing that landlord application, as well as court fees. Any court fees over $150 they are agreeing to waive by signing that. And it will show a little bit in the settlement statements I'm about to go over as well, just the different amounts. So we have, yes. Oh, and for income, zero income also, they can do self-declarations of zero income if they do not have any household income and they can't provide any proof of not having income, like a letter from their job stating that it was lost and they no longer have any income. Those can be accepted as proof of zero income as well. Going on to, we have two different types of settlements or CODs that will be used in cases for payment to be dispersed. These just go over the terms of the payment and what they mean. When signing the applications for assistance in both the landlord and the tenant applications, they are agreeing to the terms of the settlements. And that is why it changed from a settlement agreement, which had to be signed by both the tenant and the landlord and EDP, to just settlement statements, because they already are consenting to abide by the terms of the policy in submitting those applications. So we'll see settlement statements for cases that are not yet in court, because for this program, you don't have to receive a court summons. You can base it off of just the landlord saying you're behind on rent and the ledger proving that, or 7-day notices. So we will try to catch some cases before they go to court, which in that case, they won't get like court cost in the payment, but we can use a settlement statement. If it's past that time and a settlement statement cannot be used, the worksheets themselves can be sent to the attorneys, either for the tenants or the councils, or either the tenants or the landlord's attorneys. They usually have what's called a conditional order of dismissal, and it will just dismiss the case per the terms of the CERA program, and that the payment will be made. So we have two different types of settlement statements that we use. Okay. So this is the first settlement statement that we're going to use in terms of landlord, utility, or internet company opt-outs. So for this program, if the landlords choose to not participate, the payment will be made directly to the tenant. And so we just have to fill out these settlements that are going to them. We need to put the date that it was prepared on and submitted, landlord tenant names based on the lease, start of the lease to make sure it's accurate, what day they received the notification or the notice or notice to quit, anything stating they're behind. We can either base this date off of the original demand for possession or court summons, whatever was provided. This Part C would be based off of the date they received their past due notice, if this is just going directly to a utility company. And this is where we just fill out what the CERA program will be paying, how late it will be paid, and the agency that is actually distributing the payment. So if it's being released from HAWK or the Salvation Army, it would say agency would be Housing Access for Washtenaw County, parentheses, Salvation Army. And then if the tenant is receiving future rent, that would be outlined in section B, as well as if the tenant's amount is over the fair market rent the amount they will have to pay would be outlined in this, as well as just what the CERA program will be paying the tenant because the landlord chose to opt out, but the tenant is also agreeing that they will be paying either their own utility company or their own landlord within 5 days of receiving the check. This looks a little different from our other settlement statement, which is when both the landlord and the tenant are agreeing to participate. It's more of an agreement because with the landlord participating, they are agreeing to waive the late fees past 400 as well as court costs past 150, where if they are not choosing to participate, they're not waiving those. So it's filled out basically the same with a lot of the similar information, but it's showing that the payment is going directly to the landlord. And if the tenant does have to pay anything, what the tenant will be paying directly to the landlord as well as just going over different things, making sure the landlord is in agreement to waive the amounts as well. Yes. So that is what I have in terms of just going through documents. I know that was a lot to cover. Are there any questions about anything?
So again, a lot of information. I'm sure you all need to process a lot of this. So as Anna and I are going to follow up, Gabby is always here for you to ask questions to. You all will not be expected, at least the new temp folks that are coming in, will not be expected to start processing applications this week. So you have time in order to understand and get familiar. We'll send out all this information. But again, want to open up. Are there any pressing questions right now that are running around in your head? This is also helpful for us to know. We're going to be each new group that's coming on to support. We're going to be doing this training. Eventually, we'll just be able to give out the recording, but this is the first one. So we want to make sure we're also able to cover whatever things folks need to know in the beginning that we might not even recognize. So please, there are no dumb questions. Gabby, I have one question. I don't quite understand in this process how future rent is calculated. So like we put in there, you have the tools, we'll get the ledger to know what's missing, but does the application tell or determine how much future rent someone gets?
Be helpful if I unmute myself. So the future rent is calculated based on the CERA worksheet. It's going to take their rental amount, and if their rental amount is over the fair market rent, it wouldn't calculate for a full 3 months, but if it's under, it will, if they are qualified for the 3 months of rent moving forward. So the Excel sheet kind of just calculates it itself based on the information filled out the top with the income and the rental amount, as well as just what they're eligible to receive, as long as they're not going over that cap of like 12 months plus 3 months moving forward. So if they are more months behind, it may change what they are eligible to receive.
Gabby, when you presented the ledger, I just had a little difficulty kind of understanding and reading it. I don't know if it was the small printing of it, but I just kind of needed that to be elaborated a little more. I couldn't tell, was that something that we would create our own ledger, or is it one that will help us route to calculate on our own?
So the ledgers themselves will be sent by the landlords or the tenants. The tenants can upload the ledgers that they have access to. And those will just be based on their rental amounts and accounts, which they usually show on the side, like what the charges are for. And so that will be what you differentiate utility payments versus rental or like different fees, because like damages can't be paid through the CERA account. So you can check that on the ledger and just differentiate those on the mounts when doing calculations. But those will be provided by the landlords or the tenants for the particular cases themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Andrew has been in the background taking down questions and documenting them so we can send them out to folks with the answers written down, and we'll continue to take, and with the team will continue to take questions and document them so that we're going to be consistently keeping everyone updated on questions that are asked and solutions that we figure out on the way. There will be an email going out with a lot of documents. It'll be this PowerPoint. It will be, they have the videos in it, but we'll also give you the MISHDA link for the videos where you can access. We'll also be sending over different documents that MISHDA has sent to us to be able to pass on to case managers. What else are we going to be sending? We will work on next week's training. Will be focused on navigating the portal. And we'll likely have new staff coming on for the next week's training as well. So we'll figure out a way not to make you all have to go through this same training again, but get new information and how to update the folks that are new. So this is going to be an ongoing process and us figuring out the cadence and how to structure this. Do let us know along the way what is working for you, what is not, and information that you're missing in order for you to be able to do this well. Team, is there anything else I'm missing that folks should be working on during this week?
I think it might be helpful if Marla, Shayna, Rhonda, and Sharon, if you guys can like keep track of the training needs that come up so that we can make sure that future trainings are aligned with what staff identify as needs.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you all for your time. We're only 5 minutes over the scheduled time that I wanted to end. So good job to us.
I did have one more question. I understand that we have to go through different trainings to get a grasp of what we'll be doing, but I want to know, was there an estimated start date when we'll actually be starting everything, or that was really?
That's a good question. Marla, Rhonda, so what we all decided is that start dates will be Wednesdays of each week. So as new staff come on, their official start date will be Wednesday. Friday will be the first day they start training following their start date. I think between the two organizations, we'll figure out, and whatever process you're in with manpower, what paperwork or whatever you need to complete on that end will determine which Wednesday is your start date. But Rhonda, Sharon, for SOS, do you know if you're planning your start date for this Wednesday? Or did it already start?
I think for us, it depended upon when we had access to the backside of the portal and when we could actually do the work.
Good point.
So I think that we'll just have to be in touch with everyone moving forward. I know that Marla and your crew are taking paper applications and uploading as you can. So I think we're still in the midst of not knowing exactly where we stand in terms of ready to go with the application. So we'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Any other questions? That was a really good question. Okay, well, lots of one email with lots of documents are coming to you all. Thanks to you all for your time and have a great weekend.
Enjoy your weekend as well.
Thanks.